I'm Laurie Endicott Thomas. In my book, Thin Diabetes, Fat Diabetes, I explain that high-fat diets are a serious problem, especially for people with diabetes. But many people are concerned about the possibility of a deficiency of fat. So in this video, I explain which fats are essential and how much of them people need. Only 2 fatty acids are essential, which means that you need to get them ready-made in your food. Linoleic acid is an omega-6 fatty acid that is found in many grains and seeds. Alpha-linolenic acid is an omega-3 fatty acid that is found in fresh vegetables, flaxseed, walnuts, and hemp seed. The need for these fats was discovered only when people were fed nothing but fat-free solutions intravenously for an extended period. The requirement for these fatty acids is so small that it can be met by rubbing a little bit of vegetable oil on the patient's skin. The dietary requirement for these fats is so small that it's easily met even on a low-fat diet. The fats in our diet are mainly in the form of triglycerides. A triglyceride consists of a molecule of glycerol bound to 3 molecules of fatty acid. If you've ever gotten soap in your eye, you've felt the sting from the carboxylic acid group on the end of a fatty acid. In a triglyceride, those carboxylic acid groups are bound to the glycerol, which is why the triglyceride is non-reactive. Fatty acids are carboxylic acids. Carboxylic acid is this group here with a carbon atom bound to 2 oxygen atoms and a hydrogen. So this is the carboxylic acid group. So the very simplest carboxylic acid is formic acid, which is a very powerful acid. It's found in ant venom. So if you've ever been bitten by an ant, you know how much of a sting you get from formic acid. Acetic acid is found in vinegar. It has 2 carbons. Now, acetic acid is not as powerful as formic acid, although glacial acetic acid is still very caustic. Glacial acetic acid is pure acetic acid, whereas vinegar is acetic acid dissolved in water. Propionic acid has 3 carbons, and butyric acid has 4. Now, these are what are called the short-chain fatty acids because they have up to 4 carbons in their carbon chain. Now, as the length of the carbon chain increases, they become more fatty and less acid. In the chemistry of fatty acids, length matters, but it's not the only thing that matters. The other thing that's important is the number and position of double bonds between carbon atoms. This molecule on the top is stearic acid because it has 18 carbons and it has all single bonds. Because it has single bonds between all of these carbon atoms, it's holding as much hydrogen as it can possibly hold. As a result, we call it a saturated fat. Oleic acid, in contrast, is an 18 carbon chain, but it has a double bond that is in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9th position in from the end of the carbon chain. Since this is the omega carbon, because omega is the last letter in the Greek alphabet, we call this the omega-9 position, and that makes this an omega-9 fatty acid. Oleic acid is found in olive oil, but there's also some saturated fat in olive oil as well. Now, your body can make all of saturated fat and all of the monounsaturated fat that it needs. So you do not need to get even 1 molecule of saturated fat or 1 molecule of monounsaturated fat in your diet. And if you get too much fat in your diet, as we know, that's bad for you. Now here are 2 other 18 carbon chain molecules. This one is linoleic acid. It has 2 double bonds, which makes it polyunsaturated. Polyunsaturated means more than 1 double bond. So it's an omega-6 because the first double bond is in the omega-6 position, and alpha-linolenic acid is an omega-3 fatty acid because the first double bond is in the omega-3 position. These two molecules are essential fats because the human body does not have the enzymes that are needed in order to put a double bond at this position or at this position. So if you do not get them from your diet, then your body has no way of making its own supply. And it needs these two molecules because it uses them to make other things. For example, it uses alpha-linolenic acid to make some of the structural fats that make up your brain. And it also uses both of these two fatty acids, linoleic acid and alpha-linolenic acid, to make some important signaling compounds that play an important role in regulating your immune system. So you want to get at least a little bit of these two in your body, and you want to get a reasonable balance between linoleic acid and alpha-linolenic acid in your diet. Now, one problem is linoleic acid is very common. It's a very stable compound that's found in nuts and seeds. Alpha-linolenic acid's a little bit less stable. It tends to go rancid more quickly, and it's found in fresh vegetables. So if you want to get enough omega-3 fatty acid, eat plenty of fresh vegetables. If you're in any doubt as to whether you're getting enough, add a spoonful of flaxseed or a couple of walnuts or maybe a little bit of hemp seed to your diet. Corn oil and soybean oil are made up of triglycerides that contain a lot of polyunsaturated fatty acids. As a result, those oils are oils, which means that they're liquid at room temperature. What if you wanted to take those cheap oils and turn them into something that's solid at room temperature? Well, the way you do that is by adding more hydrogen to it, by hydrogenating it. And to make the hydrogen atoms attach themselves to these spots here, you react it with the metal called nickel. And this is a coin called a nickel, but it represents the metal called nickel. The nickel acts as a catalyst in this reaction because it's not found in the final product and is not used up. It's just there to help the reaction along. The goal in hydrogenating linoleic acid here is to end up with stearic acid. In other words, you want to end up with a saturated fat. Unfortunately, because you're using brute force instead of enzymes to do this reaction, you end up with some trans double bonds. Instead of having both hydrogens on one side, you end up with a hydrogen on either side of this chain like this. So as a result, you end up with a trans fat. Now, trans fats are uncommon in nature. You don't find them too much in natural foods. You find them a lot in these hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated vegetable oils. And the trans fats are particularly important causes of atherosclerosis. So you want to avoid eating processed foods that contain a lot of these trans fats. The cis double bonds affect the overall shape of the fatty acid, which in turn affects its melting point. So as you can see in these saturated fats, they have a very straight molecule. It packs very neatly, so as a result, it will remain solid at room temperature. In other words, its melting point is very high in comparison with these other fatty acids. So oleic acid and erucic acid, because of they are monounsaturated fats, they have a single cis double bond here and here. So they melt at a somewhat lower temperature. And these polyunsaturated fats here, because they've got more than one cis double bond, they melt at an even lower temperature. So that's why these polyunsaturated fatty acids will stay liquid even in the refrigerator. In this video, I have explained some complicated chemistry, but the take-home lesson is very simple. Don't worry about getting enough fat in your diet. Modern populations are suffering from fat overload, not fat deficiency. A diet based on low-fat, plant-based foods does not lead to fat deficiency. To see problems with dietary fat deficiency, you have to look at people who have been fed nothing but fat-free intravenous solutions for a long time. For more information about sugar and fat metabolism, see my book Thin Diabetes, Fat Diabetes, Prevent Type 1, Cure Type 2. If you have any health problems, and especially if you're taking any prescription medications, please talk to your licensed healthcare provider before you make any major change in diet. A sudden change to even a healthy diet can cause serious problems. For more information, check out my website, thindiabetes.com.